Thank you, Dr. Singh. Today we have the data. We also have the right set of people. And as the consumption patterns change and as our consumption moves more towards the tier 3, tier 4 and villages, we also need to relook at what we need to do. And yes, there is a lot that's happening from the government side, but we also need to take our own initiatives to create the vibrancy that we need in the logistics sector. Thank you very much for that. We now move on to the next panel discussion on the theme, Join the Dots, Leveraging Logistics and Distribution for Optimal Supply Chain Orchestration. We will continue with where Dr. Rakesh Singh left off. And to discuss this, I have with me Amit Kumar Baveja, Director Supply Chain South Asia at Kellogg's. Amit. Manoj Khotari, Vice President Supply Chain, Zydus Wellness. Please. Aniruddha Karnataki, Vice President Supply Chain, Seat Limited. Deepak Wazirani, Director Supply Chain, Skechers. Amrendra Singh, Logistics Operations Lead, India, CSNL, Mondelez India Foods Private Limited. Harsh Vaidya, CEO, WhereIQ. Jagmeet Singh, CEO, Access Track Software. Welcome, gentlemen. And I will be the moderator for the panel, the chair of the panel. We just heard how geography and planning are two major factors driving our supply chains. We also heard how environmental, social, and governance concerns are also going to change the way we approach supply chains. Growth of consumption is now shifting from metros to non-metros, villages. We saw how e-commerce is gaining ground more in the rural areas of the country. Tying all these growth drivers is technology. We will now discuss these newer paradigms from a technology perspective. And age of Twitter, somehow as we become professional, our attention spans are also kind of reducing. And I think if we keep our responses Twitter-esque, it will help us have a much better interaction. And also, yes, we have a panel here. There is an equal amount of expertise and experience on the other side of the audience also. I would like to draw you into the conversation. So yes, we will have a significant amount of interaction with you. So let's start with, this is a free flow discussion, gentlemen. We are not going to have any scripted questions that we're going to ask. The panel and the discussions are more focused on what are the kind of challenges that we face in terms of planning and how does distribution sit within the supply chains and what can we as individuals do, not merely from an FMCG perspective. We have people from other dimensions also. We have pharma, chemicals, so we have a fairly well-represented panel there. So if I were to start probably starting with Amit. What are the how is it that you look at the current challenges to the business environment, and what are the kind of challenges you have seen when it comes to demand disruptions and the reshaping of demand? Because distribution takes from there.
Yeah, sure. See, we all have, first of all, great to be part of this panel discussion in such August forum. So I'm sure there's a lot which I will take away from this discussion. So one of the things which we have been always used to hearing is change is constant, right? So that's something. So that now is a cliche paradigm. Now it has become, it was change in constant, then constant became change. Now it's chaos is constant. And I don't know when the next step will happen where constant will become chaos. So that's the kind of paradigm which we are getting used to, especially in planning and logistics. And I can share with you, basis the experiences which I've had I was in the Asian Paints till some time back. I was handling business for the South Asia market, except India. The kind of chaos which I have seen in this period, and again joining Kellogg, again you see similar kind of this thing. And this is not going to change. I think we have to just let go of that feeling that at some stage we'll see a return of normalcy, so to say. So from that perspective, and why is it happening? See, normally in supply chain, we are used to change of one variable, which is either the supply side variable or demand side variable. Now is a phase when you are seeing supply chain, the supply side variables there's disruptions there in the form of inflation, in terms of availability issues. Also demand side, the patterns are changing. For example, if you look at the consumption pattern, what we have seen I'll give you both the examples, what I have seen in say Kellogg. The kind of contribution, the rise of contribution in e-com, especially in those COVID period, just went up significantly. The consumption from the small pack to a large pack, and all of us as a consumer can relate to it. What we would have seen is typically we are used to buying a smaller portion. The portion size becomes much larger when we are staying at home, and from our perspective, the consumption behavior changes. So both on the supply side and the demand side. And third thing which is sort of further accentuating it is, it has become across the board. It's not about one item or two items or three items. If you would see inflation which is panning out all across. So in such kind of situation, the unpredictability becomes far more deeper. And I'd link to what Dr. Rakesh was mentioning few minutes back. All the traditional forecasting models fail. For example, most of this model rely on the past data. And past data is not, when you have got month on month, back to back price increases, all of us know in FMCG or otherwise, the whole demand sort of get distorted. So in such times, I would say three or four things which have worked, which I've seen it work in both the organizations which I've been part of. One is ability to collaborate and innovate, or anticipate in this case, I would say. So first is the traditional SNOP model and IBP models, what we have seen, which possibly didn't get as much of attention in early days. Last 2 years, there's been significant rise in that. And especially because you don't know what's going to sell. You don't know what kind of demand and where from it will come from. So that's one of the things, staying on course with and closely connected with the sales team and the other team members. That's one thing which I've seen it work really well and consistently give us results and whatever experience I have seen in last 2 years. So that's one aspect of it. Second thing which what I have experienced, and it's becoming a challenge as well as an opportunity, is ability to ramp up and ramp down. Because suddenly you will realize one chain has got disrupted. Now whether it's because of COVID, whether it's because of some other disruptions sort of arising out of COVID, and then you have to hold, say, more stock at one location instead of what you had planned. You have to source it from a different location from what you had anticipated. So your ability to, whether it means warehousing space, whether it means the resources supporting it, whether it means the multi-skilling of people, because you don't know from where you have to support what, or whether it means remotely managing it. So that's the second piece which I have seen, and the companies who have done very well in this period, they've been able to manage it very, very effectively. Third thing is, which possibly, we are moving from possibly a just-in-time, which we have again, this thing, to a BCP-based planning. I have not said they are contradictory, but definitely the philosophy is, because you need more backups, you would need inventory at the right places, looking at more scenarios. And again, I have seen that giving results, because when you approach things, and again, by basis my both the experiences, with 2 or 3 scenarios in mind, you will be better off than otherwise. And whether it means, because you know which part can fail, and hence which part can sort of support. Which can be an alternate plan, which you may be thinking of, alternate supplier, which you may be thinking of. So that definitely helped me, and helped us as an organization to give results consistently in these times also. Fourth thing is a very traditional, again, very basic this thing to supply chain. How do you manage the centralization of inventory and deploy it at the right time? It may look like all of us in campuses or otherwise have been hearing it, but I think in these times what I have seen is the ability to deploy it quickly and keep it central still gives you the edge. And these are the four things, Girish, I just wanted to share
Yeah,
perspective on.
yes, in fact, yes, as you rightly said, we are moving from a just-in-time to a just-in-case. And also the ability to hold inventory and then get it right to the place where it's needed as quickly as possible also calls for a significant upgrade in the logistics capabilities of the partners that we have. Manoj, if I could take you up on the same thing, and what has been the impact of external environment on supply chain orchestration, and how do you respond to the kind of changes that he is demanding?
I think, first of all, let me clarify about the Zydus Wellness. So, wherever we go, people say we are pharma company, so we are not actually. So, we are pure FMCG play with the brands like Complan, Glucon-D, Nycil, Sugar-Free, Everyuth, and Neutralite, right? So, we operate in food, nutrition, and cosmetics. And we also do have a presence in India as well as a global presence. We serve to Africa, Asia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Hong Kong markets, right? So coming to the kind of external impact, I mean, I liked the acronym used by Mr. Mehta, BANI, right? And I would like to, use that. So BANI, B is brittle. So our supply chains are brittle nowadays. So anything can happen and it breaks down, right? So Indonesia says they are stopping the supplies of CPO or RPO, supply chain, kind of breaks down. So we are on a very, very brittle supply chain across, whether it's an incoming supply chain or outgoing supply chain. And what it has created is anxiousness. So typically any news comes and your CEO or MD calls you and immediately says, what's the impact? One thing I'd like to put here, change in psych at a leadership level, saying we don't try to put certainty into uncertainty. We have to accept uncertainty. And second thing, it is okay to say, I don't know, right? So if some event happens, then we say, I don't know, I mean, what's going to happen, let's see. So that's a kind of change in the psych which we are trying to imbibe. The third thing is non-linear, and we talked about non-linear, and for us, company like us, which is hugely summer dependent, right? So non-linear anyways was a part of DNA, but ramping up, ramping down, suddenly the heat wave comes and the demand for Glucon-D or Nycil goes up drastically, and then somewhere again in Delhi there were Ola, and then it drops down. So it's a part of life, and how do you mitigate it, right? That's a challenge. And last thing is incomprehensiveness of overall event, right? And Dr. Singh also, he has shown that container congestion in the shores of Eastern China, right? And that came, I mean, almost all of us in LinkedIn or WhatsApp, etc. And I was asked what was the impact, and I said, I don't know, because I don't have what was the standard, right, in 2018-19, because nobody took the satellite image of the container congestion. So I think these are the external environment which is going to remain. It's not going to go away. We don't try to put any certainty, but what we can definitely do is agility in response, right? And when we say agility, when we say SNOP was typically a monthly process, moved to say fortnightly. We do every day. For example, every day 10 to 10:30, the entire supply chain sits together. And then we try to address where we are. That's a kind of granular planning, response, etc. I mean, it really helps in looking the things with a different perspective. So collaboration at a very different level, agility at very different level, right? So that's one change. Even change from management committee level where, every week we sit together and we spend around 2 hours on, and it starts with a supply chain for a change. So generally it used to start with marketing, then sales, etc. So I think lot of change in a DNA of organization. The external world will remain very, very uncertain. Winner would be those who will handle this, and possibly it will give opportunity also for the growth. And lot of huge inflation in incoming commodity shortages and all. So, I mean, and yeah, there are ups and there are downs, right? I mean, so those in FMCG industry, I mean, suddenly the craft price goes up by 10 rupees, which is 35% in 1 month, and then goes down next month by 7 rupees. So what you will do? Okay, so these are some of the questions where answers are not there, but we can only respond by agility, granular planning, and in a forward supply chain, again, there is nothing like forward supply chain or backward supply chain. It's a one supply chain. And everybody needs to sit together to see the issue in totality. And that's what we are trying to address, actually.
Thanks. Anirudh, if I could request you also to probably weigh in on the external issues and also on what are the levers of orchestration, supply chain orchestration that we need to focus on.
Yeah, sure. So again, first of all, thanks for inviting me for this panel and this kind of a gathering. So just to put the things in context, I think I'm just reflecting on the current environment which I'm operating in, and to give you a perspective of the products which CEAT makes. So we make tires from 10 inch to let's say 1 meter in diameter, and maybe 5 kilo in weight per tire to about say 150 to 200 kg per tire. So that's one way to look at things, because the physical supply chain gets impacted severely because of this kind of a diverse product on one hand. And on the other hand, if you look at the customer side, I think the different customer segments which probably we deal with, whether it is aftermarket sale, which is one of the major contributor, close to 50% plus top line, followed by the OEMs, which are, I'm sure, I think if people in auto sector are here would know what kind of unpredictability has happened over the last 1 year due to chip shortages and things like that. That's probably the other segment which we cater. And then the export market, which is largely, I would say, a growth market for most probably tire companies, but it has its own challenges. Coming to the topic of supply chain orchestration or SNOP as we speak, and in context of this environment, I feel that there are maybe two levels at which the SNOP, supply chain orchestration process works. I think, and I'm just taking it as in a very academic manner, so to say. I think the levels would be short term and long term. What has, I think, changed significantly, in which maybe I think Amit and my colleague has already touched upon it, is the time period for this short term and long term has changed. And all of us know, I think, if we were planning for a 1 year budget earlier, I think in the last 2 years I have forgotten that term. In fact, we just closed the budgets 2 months back, and now people are talking about a very different outlook for the first quarter and possibly for the second quarter. So that long-term project probably has become much shorter. Short-term has become probably from quarter to month and week. And one thing which I just resonate with my colleague here is that I think all said and done, a sort of a short-term review, let's say, whether it's a daily or a weekly kind of a review, along with all the stakeholders, is something which has helped. And I think in the first year of COVID, that was the thing which sort of enabled businesses to stay afloat and sort of deliver when the demand sort of came back. So coming back to again the SNOP, I think let's just I'm just wanting to sort of lay things very in a plain speak manner. What's ultimately the objective of SNOP or a supply chain orchestration process? Ultimately, it is to sort of enable product availability at the right place at right time, as we sort of conventionally have always said. And it's ultimately boils down to availability of the products, be it, let's say, different segments, business channels or customer channels. And in some sense, I think it boils down to inventory rebalancing. So I think the SNOP process somewhere tries to optimize, let's say, your service levels and inventory, and these orchestrations or the SNOP cycles, so to say, which supply chain teams run at, say, monthly or a weekly frequency, essentially what you are trying to do is trying to rebalance the inventory, right? Whether it is, let's say, your product placement across different geographies or your capacity allocations across different business units. For example, we see a lot of fluctuation in demand between, say, OEM and aftermarket sale, and there is always a question as to how to sort of rebalance your capacity and supply decisions to cater to both the channels effectively. So that's the according to me, the objective of SNOP process. Ultimately, it boils down to inventory rebalancing at probably whatever interval you think is appropriate. So that's what I would like to state in the opening, and maybe
Yes.
some more details later.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Anirudh. Deepak, we also saw one of the slides in which Anirudh also talked about, and I think Manoj also did mention, was on international logistics and the congestion in ports, the famous green dots and the red dots, which have been now, you started getting WhatsApps of today's port congestion. We also have seen other disruptions happening in international logistics. If you look at what's happening from Indonesia, one fine morning gets up and says, no more palm oil, or your corn, your sunflower oil, everything going for a toss. How would you look at all these challenges from an international perspective?
Sure. Good morning, friends, and thanks for having me here. I work for Skechers, and typically for us, our whole supplies happen from, globally managed factories. For example, in my US business, we have 1 lakh plus only footwear SKUs. I'm not talking about apparel. I'm not talking about accessories and all that. And in a place like India, we have about 18,000 SKUs, and typically one SKU would get made in one global factory, depending on where the factory is located, and it is expected to ship across the globe from that factory, right? That's how you build supply chains to be efficient. Before COVID hit us, it was all about efficiencies, globalization, capacity maximization, all your molds, all your investment on making that pair, making quality very, very standard was with one factory, right? So while you make so many designs, while you make so many colors and all that, for that specific SKU, your entire focus was, one factory, despite somebody having the capability to make it. You would focus on that one guy, get the best finished product out of him, show it to the globe, pick up orders. So here you are, so dependent on Chinese, Vietnamese, Cambodian, a little bit of Indonesian factories. And of course, you mentioned the situation of Shanghai today, 4 weeks of shutdown, and factories being closed. I mean, okay, cities shut down. I was part of Diversey when the first wave of COVID happened. We saw what was happening to China, and I used to manage Southeast Asia. So, with all that, we could kind of make suddenly India as the base because China COVID started. But when you work in supply chains like this, how do you manage a supply chain, right? Suddenly 20-30% of what is coming from China, large part of it coming from Shanghai, Shenzhen, all of that, is out by 4 weeks, is out by 6 weeks, with so much uncertainty that, nobody knows when Xi Jinping decides to, lift the lockdown in Shanghai, and, every day people are coming down, getting tested. So it's a every day you take it day by day, actually. Uh, you know, talking about classical SOP, SNOPs, it's no longer about optimization. It's no longer about, you know, what can you, it's all about business survival, right? For us today, it's all about conscious bullwhips that I'm creating, right? Every Monday we have a meeting on forward planning. We no longer call it SNOP, this, that. We just talk about planning as forward planning. You know, how much material do I have? What do I need to do with it? When we do our reviews, we typically only look at what I have in the pipeline in the next 1 to 2 months. And the only thing I kind of try to show is the material that has been picked up. That's the only certainty I have, which is also to an extent, you know, sometimes that goes away. Suddenly you have congestion in Colombo. I mean, who thought that, you know, a fragmented player, I mean, such a small country like Colombo will start to impact, you know, today, for example, if I want to export something to Maldives, my times are out by 3 weeks. I don't have, I mean, Maldives is such a small country, and suddenly you want to ship something to your stores there, your stores are out of stock because all your shipments go to Colombo and then, you know, get routed to Maldives. So there's so much happening in the whole space, and it's all about, just in case we spoke, so it's all about creating bullwhips and bullwhips on the supply side. It's all about, do I have inventory to run my business? It's largely about that, and making sure that I have a pipeline. You know, for example, we're straight away going ahead and saying, you know what, we believe this is the demand, but let's order 30% higher, 40% higher. Chances are, you know, the business world is at a stage where you know that you will not get 30-40%. But even if I get it, I'll take it. Build your warehousing capacity to 1.4x from 1. I mean, we've gone ahead and created warehousing capacity ahead of time. Even if it comes, great. You know, I don't want to get into a situation of where we were when COVID started. So it's all about how you first create your supply side strengths. And of course, you know, we are in the business where no style lasts for more than a year and a half. So, you know, the whole NPD cycle for us, or the innovation cycle for us, has gone for a toss. Typically, when you look at, you know, new styles every year, and when you have lockdowns that you have in a place like Shanghai, or you know, you have disruptions on the ports, your whole NPD cycles and your you know, typically the way you work, you know, autumn, winter, and spring, summer, some of these old terminologies itself in the whole retail game goes for a toss.
Yes, quite true. We, you know, plan for the moment and execute well. That seems to be the mantra that we're going to, but then it's also going to put a lot of pressure on the service providers, because they need to read your minds, which is going to be a tough one for them. Amarendra, if I could also bring you in at this point in time, we heard about one of the aspects which Dr. Singh also picked up was the change in consumer profile, demographics. We are moving more into the tier 3, tier 4 villages kind of scenario. How will they, how are companies preparing for that? It also requires, I think, a lot more focus on omni-channel development. What are the kind of initiatives that you're looking at when it comes to omni-channel?
Yeah. Thanks, Girish, and good to be part of this forum. We have assembled after 2 years, so
yes,
good to be physically present over here. So in terms of, I think, what we are seeing right now, and I look back for the last 2 years or so, barring the months of lockdown, the growth has been very good, very phenomenal, I would say, in most of the FMCG companies. And it's as you were saying, that it's not only the tier 1 cities which are contributing, it's also the tier 2, tier 3 cities which are contributing right now to the growth. And the growth is much more pronounced in some of the channels like e-commerce, as Amit was also alluding to. So e-commerce is something which is growing, and also the tier 2, tier 3 cities are growing. The rural proliferation, I would say, is also going. So hence what is happening is that the complete RTM, or the route to market strategy, is changing. Now, with the RTM changing, what is required in terms of logistics and distribution? Obviously, we need to plan it a little different from what we were planning it before. Yeah. So if your route to market is right now more towards rural, and you are looking at your network, which was, let's say, limited to a few DCs, which was more centric around tier 1 cities, etc. In case of some of the portfolio which we have, cold chain, what happens is that if you move towards tier 2, tier 3 cities and all, the cost becomes very exorbitant. So that's the kind of challenge which is there in terms of the cost to serve, which is happening. And also to the fact that with e-commerce coming in, the kind of MOQs, the kind of service they demand is also very, very different from whatever that traditionally we have been doing. So the daily struggle which we have right now is between commercial team and the execution operations team is that to find a middle ground in terms of what should be the minimum order quantity and the frequency that needs to be serviced to these e-commerce partners. Because obviously the growth is coming from that channel, so we cannot completely ignore that channel, and in future, obviously, the growth is going to be much more pronounced in these particular channels. So as a strategy, what we are doing is that we are revisiting the requirement of the customers, and to say whether it's channel, omni-channel, or to say whether it's traditional trade or modern trade or e-commerce, what needs to be done in terms of network? What can we do? Do we need to move into a more like a one-stop fulfillment center wherein you have your warehouse and co-packing location as well as your e-commerce fulfillment center all together coming into one? So that's one aspect that is being looked at. Second is obviously it would require a different kind of transportation planning as well. So with smaller lots, do we need to have the same kind of transportation carriers or same kind of truck types? That also something is being visualized, that this is the thing which is there. And then obviously with these channels emerging, there's a lot of focus on the BCP, the continuity process and the business continuity process. And what we have seen in the pandemic over the last 2 years is that what has helped us is obviously inventory, but then what is also helping us is how do you kind of get the maximum utilization of our assets as well as get the assets like warehouse on demand, something of that sort. If it's available, what it helped us in absorbing shocks that we had a higher inventory at certain point in time, and also when we ramped down, how do you kind of ramp down? So warehouse on demand is something which is helping us in this particular aspect. So I would say that in the entire scheme of things, revisiting the network, looking at network now from a longer term perspective, looking at your CD ratios of warehousing, and that's probably what you will do in the supplier review of the SNOP cycle also, that you need to look at the CD ratios of your warehouse, your carrier planning, your transportation planning. So that somehow needs to get incorporated in your entire SNOP cycle also, so that your long-term logistics is also marrying to the organization strategy. So that's what...
Thanks, Amarendra. Right. In fact, yes, I want to bring all these problems and kind of dump it on you because, Harsh, what happens is that you need to provide services. It's a nice way to say service on demand. But for you to operate the service on demand, you need to create flexible capacities, and capacities come at a cost. So what Amarendra talked about as cost to serve, you are the cost and he is the serve. And it's a challenge for you to integrate all these different threads and create a plan for yourself. Right? You need to be a part of their planning process, which unfortunately in India doesn't happen. Collaborative planning across the entire chain. What are your thoughts on?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. A quick background about VeriQ. We are among the youngest company in the panel. So VeriQ is an e-commerce fulfillment platform, and our proposition to brands that we work with is Amazon Prime-like logistics. So we live up to that promise. So essentially, same day, next day delivery is our core value proposition that we take to market. So in terms of the problem statements that we are witnessing in the market is that if you're selling online, speed is at the core of your proposition. So if you are offering slow speed, customers will not buy from you. They'll buy from the quick commerce platforms or Amazon, where the delivery is showing to me tomorrow, 48 hours, or in some cases same day. So that's a problem statement that we solve for businesses. Now, by first principles, you can only offer fast shipping speed if you're closer to customer. And that's what we solve for businesses. So there are two parts to it. One is you need to know where the order demand is going to come in from, what SKUs, what volumes, so that you can do a planning on that. And then the second is you need to have a network. And that network also looks pretty nuanced. You would have large FCs at the outskirts of the core demand centers where you're processing in large volumes. But if you want to offer, say, a same-day delivery, it cannot be executed from a FC which is in the outskirts. Then you need a urban dark store which is in proximity of where the demand is getting generated from. So we solve both the two problem statement. The first part, which is the planning bit, since we primarily operate in the e-commerce supply chain space, we get the benefit that the accessibility of data across the platforms and visibility is much better than, say, offline, where there is also a lag in consuming that data and planning. So we support brands across the various platforms. So we support 20 plus marketplaces, D2C channels, and we consume that data, build our prediction models, and help businesses with two things. First is the right network design. How many warehouses do you need to be able to offer fast shipping to core of your demand centers? And the answer would look different for every company. Some of them are little regional nature, or the demand is skewed. Some of them are, say, someone like Cadbury would have a demand across tier 2, tier 3 cities, where the network requirement would be much more complex. Then the second part of the problem statement is that once you have cracked down the network design, the inventory capital is still limited. You cannot just go about replicating everywhere. So you need to have very clear insight on how much to keep where our machine learning models come in. We have our core planning team, which we have also gotten from Flipkart. And we build that models looking at seasonality, your historical demand, and generally how that geography is shaping up. And there are always a variable where the market is growing very quickly. So there is going to be always some new insights, which models needs to learn itself and then take it. The second part is the flexibility of the network itself, where for most of the companies that we work with, they don't need to have that warehousing fulfillment infrastructure as a big capital expenditure on them, where a on-demand platform like us allows them to make it like an OpEx. And we take that risk. We are comfortable taking that risk because of working with different brands, we have a general sense of the prediction model of the demand and everything. So we go about building that supply chain in that manner. But yeah, the general proposition which we know is all the brands now are coming online, or it's like a online and offline. So the commerce is not is omni-channel in general. So there is going to be platforms which are going to be different for each micro market. A lot of tier 2, tier 3 cities, social commerce is coming in a big way, live commerce is coming in a big way. There is Amazon and Flipkart, there are so many vertical marketplaces. So commerce is going to come in from everywhere, and we are solving the problem statement of a horizontal fulfillment platform which can fulfill the requirement everywhere.
Thanks, Harsh. Yeah, probably technology can help us in a long way in trying to address it. Unfortunately, we are also living in a time where behavioral changes are so fast that we have to work with parsimonious data. And therefore, learning models which can work with as little data as possible are what probably would give us the kind of advantage that we need. Jagmeet, we heard all the problems, and typically it is believed that all the solutions lie with the technology providers. What is your view on the kind of efforts that we need to bring in to create the visibility and to create the kind of efficiencies that we need across our distribution chain?
So, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel. So, Access Track pioneered India's first unified digital logistics platform. And, it was great to hear from so many eminent panelists here about the, the challenges in the supply chain network and how they're trying to solve. What we try to solve is the bottoms-up approach, because most of the, the scenarios which, we have been hearing is more on the planning side, more on the inventory side, more on the fulfillment side. But if you look at, how we do things is, we start basically referencing a very basic standard model of SCOR, Supply Chain Operations Reference Model, which says plan, source, make and deliver. So planning part and the rest of the top model is generally covered by IBP. IBP generally solves the problem. Has it solved 100% problem is yet to be seen, and those models keep evolving. But it is the bottoms-up approach from where the fulfillment centers to your retailers to your last consumer, where actually the money gets realized is the room, is the play, where technology helps it. I think Amrinder brought in a point where he mentioned about going to the line elements of type of trucks which we need to ensure that I can make a fast delivery, I can make a more logical delivery. In fact, I like to add up on top of it, making a coordinated and consolidated supply chain which can help me to design my trucks, design my loads and stuff like that. So how the technology helps is that we run the patterns, we manage the patterns to understand that there have been some demand coming from maybe a new place X over a period of time, what has been the heat map. So that means if there is something new coming up in that area, there is an opportunity for me to bring maybe a fulfillment center or maybe a small depot near that area so that my next time fulfillment is much faster. If that is not the case, I'll see the movement happening from various modes, maybe from a warehouse to my another center or maybe plant to a warehouse movement, how those movements are helping me to evolve my supply chain network. So we came up with a model called low cost. So low cost stands for LO, which stands for location. The location could be your customer place, your fulfillment center, could be your dealer depot and stuff like that. So that is a location from where the demand is coming or where I need to supply. Cost is, CO stands for cost, which is mostly about cost optimization. I would not like to use the term reduce, because reducing cost is sort of a big business challenge. More of the optimization we can do, and then we can derive the value out of it by saying that we have sort of reduced the cost, and those are the benefits. S stands for safety, because it's one of the most important elements. While I may be able to deliver just in time, I may be able to deliver nearest to my customer in shortest possible route. But have I delivered it safe? Some of my panelists here are from FMCG, they are doing some cold chain and all that. If I'm delivering my stuff and it is not safe, I have actually made only one line item tick that I have delivered, but it did not serve me the purpose. It did not serve the purpose of me getting the revenue. It did not serve the purpose of me retaining the client. So S stands for that, and T is the time. Time is a multi-dimensional parameter because it starts from the top, from where you're getting your global supply chain impact raw material to the point where it is reaching to the end customer. So the low cost framework which we developed to design the technology backbone of the platform is sort of helping more or less the different customer segments we serve by making them the heat maps, by making them the pattern analysis to understand where the new demand could potentially come. And also by leveraging the elements that, these are the potential, by running AI models, that these could be the potential views where some of the new opportunities could come up. One of the, colleague here mentioned about, we generally take a 30-40% hike based on whatever the demand we are having, and that may not be true. He's absolutely right, because that is absolutely not the right way, because that would still impact your entire logistics planning. One was a very interesting element coming from, I think from CET panelist, I'm not right, but talking about moving away from yearly planning and coming down to monthly planning, because that is how the low cost actually comes to life. It helps you to address your daily demands, right? And then it helps you to address your weekly to monthly, and then you can always rehash it. There is always going to be some sort of historical data which you will use because it is changing and evolving, and there is always some sort of a data which you will be referencing from the cross industry which you will be building on your models. So technology platform, like the unified platforms in simple terms help you to understand different sources of the information from where you'd be getting the data, integrating within your enterprise level applications, could be your transport management systems, could be your SAP HANAs, could be your any other Salesforce based applications or CRMs and all that, and then designing those into a meaningful, like one of the interesting pictures Dr. Rakesh had shown on the last slide, showing you sort of a map that this is how the entire network of supply chain looks like. So that is how unified logistics platforms come into play.
Thank you. I just received a notification from my time manager that I am overrunning, and so hence I would like to, do we have any more time, manager? No. She's very emphatic about it. It was fascinating to look at the challenges. In fact, we traced the challenges we took off from where Dr. Singh brought out the various elements and then put it across to the practitioners for their views on how those challenges translate to problems on the ground and how they are tackling those problems. I thank all my panelists for having taken time off.